Hi there. Welcome to Get Productive with Microsoft Azure Deployment Templates. This is episode 9, Extend the Arm VS Code Snippets. My name is Tim Warner. I have two goals for you in this lesson. First, we'll introduce VS Code snippets in general. Then we'll demonstrate via demo how we can edit the Microsoft-provided built-in Azure Resource Manager snippets. Go to timw.info/ARM to get to this course's online table of contents. What is a snippet in VS Code? Well, I would call a snippet a language-specific piece of string data, alphanumeric, non-alphanumeric data, a code block, let's say, that because VS Code is a multi-language editor, there's a separate snippet file available for each supported language. We saw earlier in this course that we can simplify repeating code patterns by using the Azure Resource Manager tools extension in VS Code, and then using a trigger. As you can see on at right, I'm starting to type KE in the resources section of our Arm template, and thanks to the Arm tools extension's built-in snippet library, we can press Tab to expand to the rest of that code block. So our goal here is productivity by repeating code patterns in a simple way. Under the hood, these VS Code snippets follow the same syntax rules as TextMate. TextMate is a macOS text editor. You'll also see that these snippets can be made dynamic. There's various ways that you can tokenize or create placeholders that are navigatable, if that's a word. Navigable, I think is the term, with tab stops. And we can put in enumerations to constrain the data, or just really to make it easier for us to put in enumerated data. The purpose of this demo is not to give a well-rounded treatment of snippets in VS Code, but instead we'll hyper-focus on the snippets included in Microsoft's Azure Resource Manager tools extension. My fellow Microsoft MVP Sam Kogan is the guy responsible for those snippets. He invested a lot of time, and I appreciate his work here very much. He used to keep the snippets in his own GitHub repository, but Microsoft evidently liked his work so much they asked for permission to include his snippets in the Arm tools extension, so that's where they are from now on. So as you can see, I'm in VS Code, and I've installed the Arm tools extension. Another thing you'll want to make sure to do is open your settings file. I went to View Command Palette, and I just typed settings. You can look at the settings in the JSON view, or there's a UI view down here. I went into JSON, and let me zoom in a bit so you can see. You want to make sure to have what I have on line 19, the editor.tab completion property. You should set that to on. That will enable you to trigger snippets, and I'm pretty sure that it's set off by default. I probably should have showed you that setting earlier in this course. Sorry about that. Now, what about the Arm template snippets? How do you actually get to them? Well, again, as we can do most things in VS Code, we'll open the command palette, and if you type snippet, you'll see preferences, configure user snippets. Like I said, there's a whole lot more to snippets than what we're going to cover in this demo. As you can see in the lower part of this dialog, you can create your own global snippets file that is irrespective of any language. Otherwise, there's going to be a separate snippets file for each language that you've got configured in VS Code. I want arm-template.json. And as you can see, Azure Resource Manager template. That shows up in my existing snippets list. You can also type ARM to jump directly to the entry in the snippets menu. I'm going to click that link, and this opens up the underlying raw file. We've been working just as a hello world type example in this course with the storage account, and you've seen me trigger that many times. So I'm actually going to Control F and just do a search for storage account so we can jump right there. Let's take a look here. If I select line 2240, you can see that it ends down here on 2260. Comma separated list of key value pairs. Remember, that's what JSON is. So what we have in a snippet definition is on line 2240, this is the friendly label of the snippet that shows up in the VS Code menus, or in your IntelliSense tooltip, it'll show up there. The prefix is the trigger that you type in order to initiate that snippet. The body is the actual content of the snippet. And I know you're seeing a lot of weird characters, right? A lot of backslashes, like \T. What you're seeing there is a notation called escape characters and escape codes. \T tells VS Code to insert a tab stop. Because, you know, traditionally or canonically, when you see Arm template JSON, it makes use of tabs in order to make the code more readable. So you can do \T to insert a tab, and then there's other backslashes that escape other characters. On 2244, notice that we have \. This is telling VS Code not to interpret the double quotes as code, but instead to consider the double quote as is, literally. You see what I mean? You're escaping the function. So essentially, no matter what your language, in this case, of course, we're dealing with Arm Template JSON, you construct what you want to be as the body of your snippet. If you're doing Python, for instance, you might want to create an if block. If you're doing a PowerShell snippets entry, you might want to do a switch, whatever the case might be there. Another thing I want you to see is this concept of tokenization, where you can create placeholders. As you can see, this notation, $curly brace, notice that there's an index number, 1, and you can actually do something called mirrored tokens, where you reference the same number. These $numeral patterns allow you to navigate among these fields when you first create the snippet. And when the index has the same number, it's mirrored. So if you provide a value for storage account 1, it'll be mirrored down here automatically. And then when we hit tab, we'll go down to $2, and notice that we have an enumeration there. Remember, this is defining a storage account. So this means when you trigger the snippet and hit tab, you'll see in VS Code a drop-down list that shows you those options. Now, how do you know what the options are? Remember, in a previous lesson, I gave you a link to the Arm Template resource definitions. And so on this page, we can do a search. We can filter for storage accounts and go to the canonical storage accounts definition. And in that template reference page, we'll see not only the JSON that corresponds to the object, but if we scroll down further, we'll see all the valid options for the different properties, like the stock keeping unit. If we click over to there, these are all the different replication options that we have available to us. I can select all of those and put them in my clipboard, and we can add them to our snippet if we want to. Now, do you want to actually modify the Arm templates snippet file? That's another question, and maybe I'll address that in another lesson. Backing up your files. It seems to me if you update your Arm Tools extension, you may overwrite snippets here. So be careful modifying these built-in snippet definitions, or if you're going to edit them, make sure you're backing up these JSON files on a schedule. But anyway, let's say on line 2251, we're only going to do storage v2 or blob storage as our options. We can cut down this enumeration list just by removing the entries that we know we're not going to need. So let me bring that down to storage v2 and blob storage. When you're doing an array, you would use the pipe character before and after. And you can see, for instance, down here under type, it's just going to default to premium LRS. But we could change that into an enumeration by adding pipe characters before and after and adding in additional options like standard _ LRS. Maybe for cost savings purposes, we wanted to make it easier when we use the snippet that we only use properties that we know are valid and in compliance with our team. You see a little bit on how that works? Another thing to consider when you're constructing these snippets, you may want to modify what the extension author gives you or start something from scratch. There's a really cool website I'm aware of called Snippet Generator, and I'll give you the short link to this at the end of this lesson. And notice how it can generate dynamically VS Code, Sublime Text, or Atom snippet syntax. So if we come back to the definition of the storage account, we can copy the canonical definition JSON, come back to our snippet generator, paste that in, and notice that the generator gives us all those escape characters and all of that stuff right out of the box. And you can add in tab trigger and index numbers and enumerations and so on over here in the work area at left, and the generator will generate the syntax for you over at right. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So let's finish this out by coming back over to my Azure deploy.json test file. And I'm going to start by typing ARM. That trips off the snippets dropdown that are coming from the Arm Tools template. Again, if you create your own snippets file, you can include your own snippets that will not be overwritten if, in this case, as I said, Microsoft publishes a new version of their Arm Tools extension. Well, I'm going to select the initial ARM exclamation mark by pressing tab. That gives us just the generic template definition. And then if I come into the resources array and start to type storage, if you find that the snippets don't show up, you can manually trigger the IntelliSense by using Control Space. At least that's what you use on Windows. It can be a little slow performing from time to time. There we have it. And we can see the ARM tools, ARM storage snippet show up in the list first. And if I hit tab, it creates the object, and notice the color coding. The first two, I think those are purple, are mirrored values. And then you've got kind, name, and tier. So again now, in the real world, I wouldn't want to hard code the storage account name, but I'm going to in this case. I'll say demo, STG, and then a long string. Notice that the mirror fills in the display name for us. Then I'll hit tab and notice that kind shows only the two enumeration options that I edited in the underlying snippets file. I'll leave storage v2, press tab one more time, and I must have made a mistake in my syntax for name, but I would expect the same drop-down control to show up there as well. There's the tier. The tier is still working. Let me use my arrow key to go down and then press tab again. You can only go through these tabs once. Once you go through the body of the snippet, you're done as far as using the tab completion. For further learning, the official Microsoft VS Code snippet reference is at timw.info/temp9a. I found what the site owners call their definitive snippet tutorial. I think definitive actually fits here. It is the best snippet tutorial I found online. That's timw.info/temp9bb. And then that snippet generator I showed you in the demo, you can go to at timw.info/temp9cc. That's it. Thank you so much for your attention and participation. Our next episode is called Design Arm Template Variables. You can find the course TOC again at timw.info/ARM. My Twitter handle is TechTrainerTim. My Pluralsight courses are at timw.info/PS. And lastly, my website is techtrainertim.com. Take good care. I'll see you in the next lesson.